Welcome to the Real Estate Espresso Podcast, your morning shot of what's new in the world of real estate investing. I'm your host, Victor Menashe. On today's show, we're talking about how to navigate through this period of uncertainty. We're deprived of social contact. We're the target of more online marketing than ever before. And if you're thinking we're the target of more advertising on social media, you're not imagining it. The gyms are being asked to close for a second time as COVID-19 case counts rise in many jurisdictions. Restaurants are closing, routines are being disrupted, and video conference fatigue has definitely set in. I found myself not participating in 3 conferences this past week that I ordinarily really would want to attend. These are conferences with people that I know firsthand. I know the content would be amazing and uplifting. I regularly attend the New Orleans Investment Conference each year in New Orleans. It's the longest-running investment conference in the U.S., and the conference organizer, Brien Lundin, is a friend. Spending time with the attendees is one of the highlights of the year. Conferences always have 2 components. Number 1, the speakers, but number 2, the attendees, and I love spending time with the attendees. I find that these conferences compress timeframes when it comes to relationship building. I also love spending time with Dr. Chris Martenson and Adam Taggart at Peak Prosperity. They had their conference this past weekend. Of course, it was virtual. The lineup of speakers looked amazing, but it's also my wife's birthday, and I had to choose. And the Podcast Movement Conference is underway, and here too, there's some amazing speakers. The content looks fantastic. But instead, I only attended 2 events this past week, and both of them were mastermind calls. They were not conferences. One of my masterminds is with Kyle Wilson. Kyle used to be business partners with Jim Rohn before he died. Kyle has attracted some of the most amazing people into the mastermind and some extraordinary speakers. Kyle's been a past guest on my podcast, and you definitely want to check out that episode on November 4th of 2018. Wow, that's almost 2 years ago. It was a great episode, and you'll definitely want to check that out. Now, I find the time that we spend together in the mastermind to be uplifting, to be grounding, and nourishing of the mind and spirit. There were so many profound things said during the 2 days. It got me thinking about the folks who regularly post quotes on social media. Quotes are fun and often thought-provoking, but they rarely have lasting impact by themselves. I found that quotes do have lasting impact, though, when you know the author of the quote and, most importantly, the context in which the statement was made. In this week, during the 2-day mastermind, there were so many quotable moments. I'm going to share 3 quotes with you from this past weekend, and all of them have a context. So here we go. The first quote is by Robert Helms. We were talking about the uncertainty that's present in everyday projects. Could be a project delay introduced by the city, could be the result of a regulation change, could be a hurricane, or maybe even a pandemic. The reason doesn't actually matter. There are surprises like a bend in the road, and Robert said, a bend in the road is not the end of the road unless you fail to make the turn. I'm going to say it again. A bend in the road is not the end of the road unless you fail to make the turn. So here we are in 2020 with a bend in the road. It isn't the end of the road. It's just a bend in the road. So the question for you is, are you prepared to make the turn? Later in the session, we were talking with Dr. Tom Burns. Tom Burns was a guest on the show about a week ago, and he has a new book, Why Doctors Don't Get Rich, launching on October 27th. We were talking about how Tom always seems so calm and never in a hurry. Tom's a real estate developer and an orthopedic surgeon, and I asked Tom how he doesn't allow the pressure of deadlines to affect his day-to-day life. He said very simply and naturally, he said, my time is not defined by other people's priorities. I'm going to say it again. My time is not defined by other people's priorities. And he went on to explain that he rarely feels time conflicts. He gave an example. He said when his children were young, he would reschedule patient surgeries if it was his day to read stories to the first grade class. He would forego income and inconvenience his patients because he was clear on what his priorities were. My time is not defined by other people's priorities. So powerful. The third quote is from Mitzi Perdue. Mitzi was married to Frank Perdue from the Perdue chicken fame. Mitzi's maiden name was Henderson and came from the founding family of Sheraton Hotels. I was very taken with Mitzi. She's a real fireball of positive energy. And when her husband was in his early 80s, Mitzi and her husband, Frank, worked together on preparing an ethical will. Now, an ethical will is all about legacy. Her husband was a wealthy man, and no doubt he left a sizable inheritance to his children. But there's a difference between inheritance and legacy. See, inheritance is what you leave to your children, whereas legacy is what you leave within your children. So the ethical will is all about legacy. And I'm going to share one of the items from his ethical will. Here we go. If you want to be happy, think about what you can do for others. And if you want to be miserable, think about what is owed to you. I'll say it again. If you want to be happy, think about what you can do for others. If you want to be miserable, think about what's owed to you. And as you think about that, have an awesome rest of your day. Go make some great things happen. I'll talk to you again tomorrow.